All right, hello everyone. My name is Mason Rowley and I am with the Office of International Programs. Welcome to the International Symposium. We are very grateful that you are here. This session is titled Sailing the Seven Seas, Tales of Teaching on Semester at Sea. And it is presented by Jen Rousselot, there you are, Assistant Professor of Horticulture in the Development of Horticulture and Landscape Architecture Department, Andy Seidel, Professor of Environmental and Developmental Economics in the Department of Agriculture and Resource Economics. Megan Lewis, Director of Theater in the School of Music, Theater and Dance. And Ursula Quillman, Assistant Professor of Oceanography in the Department of Forest and Rangeland Stewardship. Before we begin, I do have a small request of you all. For those of you who are in the room, if you could please use our QR code and provide some feedback for us, we'd be very grateful. For those of you who are online, you will have a link appear on your screen at the end of the session. And you will also receive an email with a link to our survey as well. So with that, I will turn it over to our wonderful panel. And thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Well, hello everyone. It's a delight to see you all here and interested in these 4 Voyagers journeys related to Semester at Sea. I am reusing a presentation, so I should have everyone's name on here. I'm so sorry. But I've given this presentation probably 5 or 6 times ever since we got back. We returned on April 22nd from Semester at Sea last year. At least that's when we got off the ship. And so ever since then, everyone wants to hear the story. So I just put together a little slideshow. If you want to see our voyage map, it's right here behind us. And we should also mention we have 2 audience members that were also on the ship with us here as well. So raise a hand, who's familiar with Semester at Sea? Okay, fantastic. So I don't have to define it. Is that accurate? Or in 90 seconds, it's essentially you circumnavigate the globe, part of it on the ship, and teach or learn as you're sailing. We had about 1,000 people on our voyage, give or take, 450-ish students. There were 100 faculty, companions, and families. And then there were about 100 lifelong learners. So those are folks of any age that can sign up and join the voyage. And then the remaining balance is the crew. So there's 200 or so folks. And we just created a little small town on this ship, sailed from Bangkok all the way over to Germany. That's where we ended. That's why I said Bangkok to Bremerhaven in my little introduction. I do have a blog all about that experience, not that you have to follow it, but I just wanted to show a couple of images with the little bit of time I have. This was our first experiences in Bangkok, just to give you a little view of that. That's where we embarked. That's my daughter. My family came with me. So my husband, who's an owner of a business, and my 2 children that were at the time 9 and 13, or 9 and 12, joined us as well. So this is what the ship looks like. I mean, it's just like it was yesterday. And then our first stop was in Penang, Malaysia. So there's just a bunch of images of the fantastic diversity of architecture and culture that's in Penang, Malaysia. We had a little incident with the monkey. That's a very common thing on Semester at Sea. And then we went to India. In fact, my shirt is from India. We were in Kerala at the southern end. And I did one of my field classes when in India. So I took all of my students in one of my courses all around to look at agriculture as an aggregate in Kerala, India. That's my class. We took a little vacation. We learned all about what it's like to sail on a ship. That was the first time I had ever sailed beyond one little cruise, and I thought it would be the same. Oh no, no, it's very different. And we had quite a grand time in Kenya. Meg was on this ship, the Tamarind Dhow.
Yes, it was delicious. We had the most amazing meal.
Yeah. And we did, of course, a safari up in Kenya, life altering. I talk about that all the time, including some really wild riding. My research area is green roofs, so I was absolutely delighted to go to this Maasai village, which is one of the most intact in terms of heritage tribes in Kenya. And they had green roofs all over all of their rooftops. There's all kinds of interesting weather-related and what's the word? Ceremonial things. Rituals.
Seaboard rituals, I would say.
And we had a couple days in Mozambique because we were rerouted due to weather. This bracelet's from Mozambique. My absolute favorite was actually South Africa because it's a center of plant diversity that's unique across the entire globe, different from every other location. So we had an absolutely wonderful time in that area. There's all kinds of shenanigans that occur on the ship, and you kind of have to be there in order to experience it. Ghana is where I got my earrings. Ghana was incredibly colorful, a lot about chocolate there. We also did an overnight with Meg's son, who was on the voyage as well, in a tiny little town outside of Takoradi, Ghana, and it was absolutely incredible to see just what life was like in this tiny little village. And then we trekked for several miles with all of our equipment because the bridge had gone out. So there's all kinds of those stories. Morocco is where I got my necklace. I talk about Morocco all the time too. Now some of my research is related to saffron, which is a huge production center in Morocco. So it was delightful to experience that country. And then finally, Portugal, it was our last official port, and we returned on to the ship. I got to meet a colleague of mine I've known for a long time that does research on green roofs, so plenty of networking along the way too. And there we are, finishing up in the North Sea, freezing our behinds off, and ended in Germany. So I am taking too long, probably.
It's okay.
Actually, it's just about right.
Yeah. I'm going to stand up. I cannot talk about the mustard seed sitting there. I'm very too excited. So I teach oceanography here at CSU. My friends I live outside of Boulder. They teased me, oceanography in Fort Collins, landlocked, and I said, just wait. They're going to get me a ship. 2 years later, Sylvester at Sea came around the corner. They got me a German ship, and they take me back to Germany. So who's laughing now? So mine is, the Sylvester at Sea mission is journeys of discovery that spark both solution to global challenges. And I just want to talk a little bit about 3 examples of these journeys or observations. So we're spending half the time on the ship, half the time in ports. And while we're in the ocean, we have that front row seat to just observe the ocean. And I was part of the global study team as a class that's taught to the entire shipboard community. And it was so excited for me to share, we're not just using the ocean like the railroad uses tracks, but it's actually a lot happening beneath us. Tectonic plates are moving. We're sailing over the longest mountain range we have on Earth. There are epic battles of marine life going on. The biggest daily migration, all that plankton coming up at night to feed on the phytoplankton and just to descend again during sunset. Just from my spring 2017 voyage, we had from NOAA some buoys that we got to deploy. And we deployed them around South Africa, because in South Africa, we have this warm current from the Indian Ocean meeting this cold nutrient-rich current from the Atlantic Ocean. And that boundary is shifting because of climate change. And so our buoys help to track the boundary. And because of these two currents, South Africa is amazing. We have subtropical ecosystem on the Indian Ocean side. We have penguins on the Benguela current side. It was just absolutely amazing. 2017, we ported in Vietnam. And when you're on the ship for evening seminars and so you get prepared, and global studies, you get prepared to the ports we are visiting. So we heard before Vietnam about Agent Orange and the devastation it did. And I was lucky enough that I got to take one of my classes on a field class, and we looked how these mangrove forests are really super resilient plants, how they came back, how they are filtering the toxins out of the soil. And then my students, they got to plant mangroves. And this is now what the area looks like, having recovered after Agent Orange. And then on this voyage, so the 24 voyage, we went on a field class in Kenya to Women's Initiative, where they are regrowing mangroves, because we're just finally realizing how important they are for the planetary health. And then the other is in 2017, I was in Ghana, and we were not prepared. Well, at least I was not prepared what we're going to see in Ghana. And in Ghana, there was such a layer of plastic and clothing waste on the beaches that for the first time, I'm a geologist by training, and that we humans, we have created a geological layer. And when I came back, I started to get really interested in fast fashion, because a lot of things that we think we're donating to charity actually ends up in Ghana. And people there, they're just drowning in our waste. So at that time we were visiting the lead fishermen, and you can see in the background, the fishermen came in, how much debris there is on the beaches. So I got to see it again this time around. And we went to another fishing village that's much more organized. I think that it's backed by the Chinese business, but it was a totally different experience. Fishing was a big business. And in the background, you can see some slave castles. Yeah, and so and then on the ship, I had the students in global study do this project where they had to take photographs and document the plastic pollution, do this experimental learning where they compared across different ports. And these were two of the submissions. This was in India. Both of these pictures were in India. And I just love the one of the monkey, because everything is so bleak and dark, and then a plastic bottle looks almost beautiful. It's just how nature's interacting with plastic. So I'm taking a lot of my observations back and bringing them to campus. Yeah, that was the end of my little bit.
Yay.
Thanks, Ursula. So I'm Andy Silent, professor of Ag and Resource Economics at the Department of Development Economics, and I'm a big advocate for the transformative power of international education and study abroad. I lead our Italian study abroad for our department, Cauda Toda Santos, and so we thought, okay, let's take it up a notch. And sure enough, going on SAS was completely different, and in a good way, than the other study abroad programs that I've been involved in. We traveled, my partner and I traveled together. She took on a position managing, I guess, herding. Yes, herding. Herding the lifelong learners while on the ship. And so we interacted quite a bit with that group of folks, as well as faculty and staff. And it was really remarkable for us. And so I taught 3 courses. I taught Introduction to Natural Resource Economics, a class on Agri 270, which is more or less about sustainability, and then an introduction to microeconomics. So you're going, okay, so how'd you go about doing those kind of classes in this kind of an environment? And it's like all study abroad programs, it is truly transformative, but it's much broader than it is deep. But at the same time, you've got people like Ursula doing global studies and getting the students up to speed on the port every time. And then all I needed to do was bring economics alive when we got there, which that's easy, no problem. So we went to UNESCO World Heritage Sites in every port, pretty much. And for me, that's my my bucket list. Wherever I'm going anywhere, I'm like, which are the UNESCO World Heritage Sites? So natural resource economics talks all about that, and so that's what we did. And we went to an organic farm. We went and saw in Penang. We went and talked to some folks who are doing non-timber forest products and handicrafts in also in Penang. We went to a penguin colony. We went to a winery. Meg will tell me how to pronounce this properly. Glit Costanza.
Glit Constantia.
Okay. Close-ish. Where Napoleon used to hang out, apparently. So amazing sorts of experiences for those students to bring home this experiential learning that we don't always get the opportunity to do here on campus. So although the schedule is funky, you teach on Sundays, if there were Christmas, you teach on Christmas, it doesn't matter. It's B3. And, this is part of my rotation. That was the day 1 was white polo, day 2 blue polo, day 3 blue and white polo. That's it. You kind of get used to that sort of a thing in the same shirts that you have. So we went to Tangier Chamber of Commerce for my introductory economics class, where they really try to understand what the basics of how economic systems work, and what are the bases for market economy. And these places have markets that have been in place for thousands of years. They know the basics. They know how it works. And so having that illustrate things that we were learning today about market economies was really super helpful. And having the ability to have these sort of comparative economic systems approach, because we often were going from former communist countries to those that were colonized by different countries, and they have different institutions and run things differently. And being able to sort of highlight that to students who, by and large, hadn't traveled a whole lot and probably wouldn't look so deeply into governance institutions when they went to places. That was I thought super useful. The introductory econ class also did the Big Mac Index. Anybody heard of that? So this is a way to illustrate purchasing power parity. How far does a dollar go in your country? And one way to do that is through what should be a ubiquitous product. And of course, there are issues with this, right? But that's the point. So you go, and they had to find out how much a Big Mac cost in every port. And then they had to pick their own commodity that they were interested in, that they thought could be ubiquitous, and pick up the prices of those in every port. And then we use the official exchange rate and do a little spreadsheet work. And then they can come up with the purchasing power parity. How far does a dollar go? Or in terms of dollars, in terms of Big Macs, and in terms of whatever else they chose. And it was really cool for them, because then we start talking about, well, is a Big Mac a Big Mac? Well, it's not in India. right? Well, what's up there? So what do we do? Oh, chicken tikka masala burger. Okay, cool. We're gonna do that. And then, but how, when we went to Morocco, that was where like the place you went for a date on Friday night. It's not the same. So now it's a luxury good. Now it's not a common good. And so talking about all those dimensions about how economics works and how to find a good metric was unique in this context. From a personal perspective, it's like we're in a big university here, right? And the campus of SAS is what I would picture as a small liberal arts college, maybe Noah's Ark. It's like, yeah, to historians, to economists, to, right? And survival of the fittest. No, it was, no, load them all up on the boat, and then we have a faculty meeting, and you're like, wow, this is a lot more diverse than my economics department is. How about that? And people with all sorts of different perspectives, and just from a faculty perspective, it felt to me like I'd gone away from a land-grant institution into something much more intimate, but also more diverse at the same time. So that was, I thought, really neat. I think lots of folks, at least in STEM disciplines, or researchers, come from a place of relative, what should I say? We're comfortable in our own company, and maybe not other people's. So as introverts, relatively introverts. And so when I told folks that I was gonna go on this ship and I was gonna live with 500 undergrads, they're like, you what? Andy, what the hell are you doing? You're gonna hate that. And I'm like, well, we'll find out. And having, yeah, you do have to make your own space, right? Right, John? At least two of us are on the introverted side of things. You have to find your own space and your own place to be quiet, but people respect your boundaries, and you can find places. But what I found actually was that you get to know students at a much deeper level than you otherwise would. You see them all the time, and that's actually fairly pleasant most of the time. And when we all came out of COVID, I was pretty convinced that I was good. No problem. I can be by myself. I'm cool. Then I found out that I kind of probably lost a chunk of who I was during that time that I wasn't aware of until I went on SAS. And then it was like, yeah, this is a little different. And now I might be caught singing Journey songs with 1,000 people. There might have been spontaneous dancing once or twice, but I don't think it's on video. So it didn't happen. All in all, it's not a small amount of work, teaching 3 classes that are rather compressed, but you don't go to the grocery store for 3 months. How awesome is that? No laundry. Kind of no research.
Yeah.
You really got to think about how to partition your time and space, because there's not a lot of internet. So doing research on board's tough unless you have onboard research that you could do, and maybe you could think about how to do that. But I didn't think about that. And so because of that, you have a little bit more time maybe to do course prep and interaction with folks, and really they take a whole bunch of stuff right off your plate that you would normally have to do. And now you're like, oh, well, I guess I can go play cards, and I can prep classes and I can do these things, which I normally wouldn't be able to do. So that's me in a nutshell.
So I'm Meg Lewis and I am from South Africa. So I paid all of these people to say that my country was the best. Just so you know. It was always such an honor for me to take people to my home country and to have them love it as much as they do. So that's awesome. I'm a theater historian, and I have spent the last 30 years trying to bring the world into my classroom. And what Semester at Sea gives me the opportunity to do is to take my classroom into the world. And that to me is the most powerful, I got goosebumps, look at that, you see? It is the most powerful part of Semester at Sea. I mean, I'm a huge advocate for education abroad as well. I run a study abroad program in South Africa, but I think there's something about Semester at Sea that takes students in such an intense, immersive, hands-on way into the world, where they get to learn all of these things firsthand. Like, it's one thing to learn about oceanography, it's another thing to live on the ocean and learn about it. It's one thing to learn about economics or even about like green roofs, and it's another thing to actually see it. So this was my second voyage. I sailed in 2018 and then also in 2024. I taught a whole bunch of different classes. I taught 2 theater classes, a film and social change class, and I also taught public speaking on a ship. So let me just tell you, one of the things that you learn on a ship is that you are going to do some serious core work because it is always moving, right? So you're constantly like, hey, and I think that that is a metaphor for life. Because we're always moving, we're never static. It means we can be open to understanding that the world is actually changing. And that change is the one, I mean, death, taxes, and change, right? Those are the guarantees in the world. And for students to be able to go and understand that, to understand, oh, I can be fluid in myself. I don't have to be so boxed into whatever it is, whether it's the major I've chosen or my political views or the state that I came from or any of those things. We all watch our students blossom and come to understand the world as global citizens, which to me, you can't make me a happier person, right? So what else did I want to say? As I said, I'm a theater historian, so I bring all of these traditions, especially global traditions, into my classroom. So, you know, we study kabuki and no and kapkali and all sorts of African structures and egungun masquerades and all of this stuff, right? And I do my damnedest, as you can tell, I'm the extrovert here. I do my damnedest to make it so exciting for them that they are just like, wow, that is so cool. That's even better than Shakespeare, right? But there is nothing like having students go and see Bando Tomasaburo in Osaka playing the Onagata character and actually see that legend doing that, right? Or there is nothing like taking a group of people to go and actually make wayang kulit puppets, right? And actually put the thing together and learn how it works. There is nothing like having students knee-deep in waders in the water doing water puppets in Vietnam. For them to actually understand what this means, tangibly embodied knowledge that they make with their bodies, but then also the emotional part that brings with it. So there are a couple of things that I teach all the time, and one is radical empathy, that we just open ourselves to the world with the, hey, tell me your story, rather than who are you, you're different from me. That we learn to hold multiple truths as part of that change piece as well. And of course, as an African, I always say that we're talking about Ubuntu, which is actually something that Semester at Sea has a very long relationship with. The Tutu Foundation and Desmond Tutu, we actually sailed with Semester at Sea several times. And the African philosophy of Ubuntu says that we are mutually in humanity, that I exist because we do. If I'm okay, we're okay. If you're not okay, I'm not okay, that we are in a mutual relationship with one another. And that world that Andy said, the little town that we created and this kind of like ecosystem that we create, the students and all of us learn that one part of the community gets affected and every part of the community gets affected. So I just wanted to share, I had the honor, I was so incredibly honored to give the keynote speech at the end of the spring 24 voyage. And this is what we learned. So the theater person writes poetry too, just in case you're wondering. We learned that place is not merely where we come from, located and measured by nation or faith, hometowns, home teams, and home cooking. Reorienting our compass, we have mapped new knowledge. We now know our place in the world using a new compass. between port and starboard, the bow and the stern, looking north from the global south, centered in Mother Africa, centering Africa, decentering outdated ideologies, replacing reading, writing, and arithmetic with restitution, reparation, and restorative justice. Alert to the danger of single stories. We all watched Chimamanda Adichie's The Danger of a Single Story at the beginning of the voyage. We are writing new poetry, studying history so we don't repeat it, attending to the past so we can imagine new futures, entering each new country with cultural humility, with good manners, open minds, and grace-filled hearts. And one thing that I absolutely believe about living on the ocean, and this is the personal thing for me too, but also what we learn just as a group of people, not only about this blue planet that we're on and the way that we have to take care of our mother ocean, but to understand the beautiful, difficult diversity of humanity, one need only look to the ocean. Each day she offers up a new mood. At times, she is still as glass, crystal serene, at peace with the world. At others, whipped white caps, spitting angry. Some days she rolls along, swell after swell, moving forward. She can be tempestuous, outraged, azure blue clarity, or green with envy. We are mere droplets in her watery brine. And then the one thing I want to say too, I think Semester at Sea is, because it is such a, we call it the fishbowl, right? Sometimes tensions flare. In fact, on both of the voyages that I have been on, tensions have flared. And one of the things that it gives us is a laboratory for us as teachers, but also as a community, to practice what it means to have sticky, tricky, difficult conversations. And to model for our students that when things get like that, that's actually where the real learning is, right? That's where the juicy stuff happens. So we've learned to do all that. We fought it out. What did we do? I wrote it somewhere eloquently. In a moment I will find it. Just please stand by. Here we go. We built an ensemble, a community made up of our differences and our skills, our passions and our growth, our blind spots and our failures. We built this ensemble by listening to each other's stories, writing new ones together, and at times facing off, of course the theater person uses a theater metaphor, like dramatic antagonists and protagonists in battles of belief and practice. We've prayed and protested, formed coalitions for justice. Students took initiative to discuss issues that many were afraid to. Finding workarounds, they solved problems creatively, reached across differences towards mutual understanding, understanding what Ubuntu really means. We listened in fishbowls, face to face, in classrooms and dorm rooms and dining rooms, discussing difficult issues as civil, careful listeners. We held multiple truths, coexisting, conflicting, dissecting, and digesting, wrestling with the difference between people and power structures, denouncing oppression anywhere and oppression everywhere. We learned that words can cause harm and intent differs from impact, that generational wounds inform current practices, that there are shades of an issue and not just sides of a debate. And we learned that youth can write new narratives, forge new alliances, imagine the world anew, and we all emerge richer and wiser and better global citizens for it. Thank you.
All right, now I think we have time for Q&A, right?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Does anyone have questions for us?
When you visited the Maasai community or Maasai, how did you reconcile being a viewer of people like that?
So if you didn't all hear that, when we visited the Maasai people, how did we reckon being viewers? So we were very careful, and I think Semester at Sea in general is incredibly careful about that. So we actually paid the community for their time. just like we would any other, any other person that provides a service for us, right? So we went in on their time scale because the way that the Maasai people traditionally survive is that most of the males go and herd their animals that are kept inside the village during the night because of all the wildlife that's there. They open the gates and they leave early in the morning and graze their cattle. And so we met them right before they were ready to take the cattle out. And so they showed us a whole bunch of traditional cultural things like dancing, even how to start a fire. And then they would invite us to participate with that. So we didn't directly, Semester at Sea didn't directly go request it, but it was actually the safari group that has the compound that makes the interaction occur, and so that both sides have mutually beneficial. So thank you for asking.
And I would just say that ethical tourism is something that I discussed it in all of my classes. And I think it's one of the things that students get to practice. First of all, most people are not, they've never been to these places, they don't know, they're also young and like, what do we do when we go to a place? How are you a gracious guest in someone else's culture? How do you ask for permission before you take photographs? How do you listen for the voice of others as opposed to bringing your own worldview and imposing it onto these cultures? And I think at the end, every one of my students wrote how that was one of the biggest lessons that they learned, is what does it mean to be part of a global community where your culture is only one and yours is not the dominant one. Now, the majority of students come from the United States, but we also have a whole bunch of international students. And so that also adds a whole other level of complexity to it, to see how different international students understand what America means by suddenly sailing with a bunch of Americans, right? So I think this engagement, the questions about ethical tourism, about power and all of those dynamics, but also about how we come to learn each other's differences, and that is the actual gorgeousness of the world. You couldn't find a better lab for it.
Other questions? So for faculty members who are considering doing semester at sea in the future, can you maybe discuss the process of how you started on this journey, maybe what it looks like to work with your department to get coverage for these semesters, kind of that, because I think sometimes that can be a barrier to some folks doing semester at sea and other things like Fulbright and other programs like that. So if you can maybe comment on that.
Want to talk about
GTS?
GTS?
I get started anyway. CSU is in a particularly advantageous position with regard to SAS because you take your salary with you. And yes, you have to get your permission from or blessing of your department head and somehow cover your classes or whatever. But relative to the rest of I didn't know this till we got on the ship. The rest of the folks who are on the ship aren't pulling their salaries from their institutions. And so doing, in that regard, being CSU faculty is very helpful. Getting permission is sometimes a challenge. Ursula had that challenge. I did not. My department head was happy to see me leave. So the application process is lengthy. Mary's here, she can speak to it as well. But yeah, it's plan ahead, right? Know that you want to do it, and then be flexible if you can, because sometimes they'll say, well, we're hiring now for 2. Would you be willing to do the spring or the fall, or just the spring? What is it about the itinerary that you like? That sort of thing.
And I still, so last time I didn't get the support from my department because it was my 3rd semester at sea voyage. And so I just went on as a regular faculty, so we got the stipend from semester at sea. And it was still an amazing experience.
But I did both. My first voyage, I was at the University of Massachusetts, which actually does not support semester at sea, for long story with that. But I had to be on sabbatical so that I had my sabbatical support in order to be able to afford it. And then this last time, the Global Teaching Scholarship was really very helpful. So it's both ways. And then a lot of faculty are also retired. People who are retired who then return, because they have the availability and they're not having to teach them, the daily grind that we're in.
The calls come out every year for the next available rounds. Anyone can, from CSU, the other nice thing, Andy mentioned our salaries come with it, but there's also funds that come from the provost's office, which is a tremendous commitment in order to cover your courses. So because I taught so many classes, I could, share that wealth to grad students that took over my courses. So I got paid extra while I was gone.
I might just add that it's the Institute for Support Education Semester at Sea that has this partnership with CSU that gives those funds for that support. But the Global Teaching Scholar position is competitive. So there are only 8 of those positions every year, so 4 a semester. So there are many more people who apply, and these were the standouts who receive that support. And it's challenging. The formula for the funding is based on a particular model, and if the faculty member is on a different sort of appointment, sometimes the model can be challenging. Do you remember how far ahead you all applied?
Before COVID,
Yeah.
it's 2019, I think.
And I applied, I had to actually postpone because I'm the director of my department. I couldn't just leave. So I had to postpone my voyage. I was supposed to go the year before, and then I did it a different time. So again, that flexibility, fluid thing about change and being flexible, it's a part of semester at sea in every possible way. So I would just say as early as you possibly can and be ready that things may shift and change. COVID threw a huge spanner into semester at sea's works. One voyage was in South Africa where they stopped. I really wish I was on that one. I never would have come back. But anyway, but that really interrupted global travel in so many ways. And so there was also lots of things. So just being flexible and knowing that change is inevitable.
Yeah, I was originally supposed to go on spring 22,
Same.
and it went, but not with us.
I went.
You were ready.
Yeah, we had so many diversions, but it was an amazing experience.
That was the first voyage back after COVID.
Yes.
It was, wow, I couldn't have done it. I saw another hand.
Yeah, here. I was just wondering, how would you characterize the motivation of the students? It seems like there's so much to distract them. So and I know you have class when you're on the ship, and then they have some field classes, but otherwise they're free in the ports. How would you characterize their engagement in your classes?
I have a good answer, but then you all
No,
disagree
go.
with me. So I feel like the student body was sort of split into 3 in my mind. There were a third of the students that were about the travel, not about the education. There was a third of students that were our very typical, standard CSU type of students, dedicated, interested, engaged. And then there was this third of students that were unbelievable. They were scholars from across the globe. They brought such richness into all of our classes. That's just my answer.
Yeah. I think on average, like all study abroad programs, right? On average, the students are better than normal. That you normally get, and more dedicated generally on average. On average, and usually student bodies, it's 70% female or something like that.
Yeah, it's pretty nice.
It's pretty skewed.
Women
but-
do study abroad far more than men do.
Yeah.
I would also say that, one of the things that you have to take into account is the sheer fatigue. All the time, 24 hours a day, A days, B days, A days, B days, and you get physically exhausted, but so do the students. And not, I often say that I would say probably maybe 70%, maybe even less, maybe 50% of what I'm teaching in my class is important to them. And the other 50% is engaging in the world. And so, you know, we're sitting in our classrooms here and we're teaching our subject and it's a content-based thing and that's all it is. But here students are actually, they're going out there, they're learning different languages, they're maybe getting into sticky, tricky situations that they didn't expect. So much of what they're learning, it's not just what happens in your classroom, but it is also about all of the other things. And then the other classroom, which is the shipboard community. Everybody is living and eating and breathing and in this very small space. So they're learning about interpersonal stuff. They're learning about homesickness and how to handle, you know, mental health issues when you're so far away from home and everything is foreign to you. So I think there's just, I am still in touch with all of the students from my first voyage and the second voyage. Just had one of them ask me for a recommendation. In a way that actually I connected more with the semester at sea students than I necessarily do with students at home. It's just, I think they're incredible. There are a small group of people who are just there to have fun. Okay, so the party crowd, but I think those people exist on every campus. So.
And I have my classes here on large on campus. I have like 300 students in my classes, and just on semester at sea, having a small class, getting to know the students, having, instead of written tests, you actually meet with them and do reflections in person, talking to one another is just incredible. Students were engaged.
I think I've written at least 6 or 8 recommendations from that group, and I think 2 are coming to our grad program. So,
Oh,
that's awesome. So I need to go out again. So I can do some recruiting.
Yeah, one of our students in my class actually transferred from University of Minnesota to the University after that experience. And I'm in touch with a bunch of them. Yeah, one just came in, I was guest lecturing in another class, and she came running in and we hugged right away because it's not like your typical classroom. That's for sure. What other question?
I just want to say one other thing about being a faculty member too. Andy was getting at this idea about, like, you know, you're suddenly with a group of people that's far more diverse than what you normally are in. We are so siloed as academics, right? We only talk to the same group of people in our disciplines, and our disciplines don't often talk to each other. And every time I've done semester at sea, I'm blown away that I'm sitting having breakfast with an economist, you know, an oceanographer, an art historian, a food scientist, a horticulturalist, and a theater scholar. And we're all sitting around, which we never, ever get to do when we're just on our home campus, right? So to me, it's not just what we're teaching the students and all those things, it's also that I got to learn so much about other disciplines. And I feel enriched, just personally, because I have these wonderful colleagues.
I might also just throw in that the interaction with the staff members was so rich, and, you know, also happens sometimes rarely among faculty and staff on campuses. So I don't know if you two have something.
Yeah, Scott.
Yeah,
Scott
the
Librarian.
Well, I can, so I'm Scott Bibenzone. I was the librarian on this voyage. So while my status is listed as a faculty member, right, I feel like I have the opportunity to really work with so many individuals every day. Not only we were, you know, in water, on the water, or like in port. And I think the key element that when asked, like, what's your favorite part about the voyage? It's definitely the community that's created. And that's not one of the selling points at all, right? But it's like the organic experience that everybody experiences in their own way, right? Like seeing these individuals and giving them a hug, and I haven't seen them for months, or even like Andy, I haven't seen since we got off the ship. And so it's just a fantastic, memorable experience. And, you know, it's not for everybody, but for those who it is, you know, truly, truly take that jump. Do it.
What I'll offer is Ali, him. I was a caregiver on the voyage, so I wasn't formally hired by Semester at Sea or ISC or CSU to be on the voyage. I was serving in a role that was complementary to support a residence director who had 2 kids under the age of 18. So I provided, supervision, security, safety, curriculum development, ensuring that the 13 and 15-year-old were able to continue on. But to the point about the question that Mary posed, our experiences were inextricably intertwined, right? And so Meg was talking about having breakfast. Everyone had breakfast, lunch, dinner, and then 10 p.m. snack time was always a favorite for the students and the ship kids. I think we had about 30 ship kids. These are folks that are under the age of 18 on the voyage. We had about 50 lifelong learners, and then staff and faculty all around. And so everyone throughout the voyage, throughout the experience, got a chance to interact and engage with one another, which I thought was such a beautiful way to experience the voyage. Because as folks already shared, it's not every day in our day-to-day home campuses that we get to interact and engage with students, with staff, with faculty, with kids, with guest lecturers, with interport students that come on board and impart their wisdom, their lived experiences onto the voyage. And then to be able to take the theoretical from the classroom in the shipboard community and then apply that practically in an immersive, in a short stint in the different communities you go to, it's just, it is a journey of discovery, right? That, folks are trying to solve critical issues and problems. And I think one of the foundational pieces were the sustainability, the UN sustainable goals, right? That a lot of that was tied, a lot of the curriculum was tied to these sustainability initiatives and goals from the UN, which I thought was pretty remarkable. But it really is a beautiful community. I highly recommend it to anybody, whether it's in the faculty role, a staff role, a caregiver, a companion role, or even going on as a lifelong learner. You don't have to go for the entire voyage. You can go for a segment of the voyage as well, but highly recommend it.
Any other questions? We have, 8 minutes left, is that correct?
Correct. And if anyone online wants to type a question to the Q&A section of Zoom, they can, and I'll read it out loud for you.
So a question I have is, what was a surprise on your voyage?
So many surprises. Just this voyage or the one before?
Oh,
The
or
one
past
before was-
voyages, yeah. Well, like what surprised you?
I mean, I personally, it was the first time that I'm quite an international person, but I always travel with other people. So traveling alone, especially on my very first voyage, it was just me solo. And so I really just had to learn about my own ability to navigate places where like I can't even read the language, let alone understand what's going on. So that pushed me in my own sense of what I'm capable of, and then I could empower students when they were doing that as well. I think the most surprising thing about this voyage is I took my son with me, who's a college student. By the way, there's a big cost savings if you do that for faculty. Oh my God, I pay for such incredible tuition, and this was an incredible semester. I think the most beautiful surprise, it was a surprise in that I got to watch my son experience the world as a college student and to be there to see that, which we don't often get to see, right? Because they're off doing their own thing. So there was something really gorgeous about watching him be that person.
I was surprised how much I enjoyed it, actually. I thought I was going to like it. I didn't think I was going to like it as much as I did. And the second thing is I've never been a person who would take a tour. I mean, the only thing we would ever do is take a bike tour of, like the first morning we go someplace, we get a bike tour and kind of get a feel for the old town and stuff. And then after that, I'm on my own. Like, wow, these tours are actually pretty darn good. Yeah, you learn stuff, you know? Now I'm more likely to do them. So there's that. I was surprised about that.
Nice. Good question. I appreciate that, Scott, the librarian. Actually, the thing I learned the most about was actually myself. It pushed me beyond most of my typical comfort zone. I didn't realize what an introvert I was until I was faced. I'm from, I'm the youngest of a family of 8 from a small farm in rural Iowa. And I didn't realize how much I took for granted my quiet time and space. Because I've always had that sort of security. So I learned a lot about myself, my tolerances, and then actually incorporated with that is how much I've learned since. So the end of the voyage was just the end of the data input, but the processing has continued tremendously since. Every day I learned something. I'm reliving my family, and because I got to take my family with, we'll talk about it on a daily basis. And I have a daughter with struggling with a learning disability, and it helps carry her through her problem solving with that disability. And so, yeah, I mean, there is just so much I've learned since.
I was also surprised how much I really, really liked it. So the people I told me before my first voyage, you're going to make new lifelong friends. I thought, this is really ridiculous. I have enough friends. And there's something so incredible for people that you sailed with and you don't see, and there's this instant connection. You just don't have to say anything, it's there. So that's a big surprise.
I think my biggest surprise on my first voyage is I'm in Colorado because of Semester at Sea. That's what happened. It blew my mind, and then when the job came here, I was like, oh, I'm going there. I'm going there because if any place that supports this kind of education, I want to be there. So. And the friends that you develop are lifelong. It's not just the lifelong learners who are lifelong, it's all of us.
That's right. Anything else, folks? We're bearing our souls.
Yeah. You dream about the ship?
I
do
did.
every night.
Oh, not every night.
Mike and I sometimes wake up, we're like, are we rocking? Is the house rocking? Are we on the ship again? What's going on?
2 of my classes took place in what's called the Kino, which is German for cinema, for theater. And so it's like this, like a stadium seating kind of a thing. And that was cool, except the pool backs up, pool's on the 9th deck and the Kino's on the 8th. Right behind me was the pool. And whenever it was surfs up, that thing was slamming against the wall behind me, and I thought for sure it was gonna come through. Like, oh my God. And I've been listening to this slamming against the wall back there and trying to concentrate and teach. There are some good things about not having windows, there are fewer distractions, but having the pool was something that stuck in my brain, and I still actually think about it every so often.
You learn that you need very little in the world to actually thrive and survive and be happy. You can live in a tiny little postage stamp size cabin with one little itty bitty bed, and you really only need 3 shirts. You will be issued a beautiful Semester at Sea voyage shirt, so you're like that, and then you'll buy whatever you need in other places. And even simple things like you don't need these giant things of shampoo. Like you just and I think students commented on that too. That wow, we in the West, but particularly in the US, we have so much. And then going into other places and understanding that people can be very, very happy in their wild without 500 types of soap.
Great. Well, I guess we will leave it there. Thank you all for coming. Thank you so much. If you have not already taken the opportunity to do so, please fill out our survey. We really appreciate the feedback. Have a wonderful day.